More about Teddy B and Teddy G, the Roosevelt Bears, by Seymour Eaton. Introduction. More about these bears. When in the autumn of 1905 I created the characters of Teddy B and Teddy G, I builded better than I knew. I brought these bears out of their mountain den in Colorado and started them on their tour of the East to teach children that animals, even bears, may have some measure of human feeling. That the primary purpose of animals is not necessarily that of supplying sport for the hunter. That this lesson has been abundantly taught is proven by the overwhelming welcome given the teddy bears by the boys and girls of the United States. And it is safe to say that the traditional "bear will get you" has now and forever lost its frightening significance. This book is a sequel to The Travels and Adventures of the Roosevelt Bears, and completes the story of the tour of Teddy B and Teddy G from Colorado to Washington. The third volume will report in jingle and picture the tour of the teddy bears abroad. Seymour Eaton, Athdara, Lansdowne, Pennsylvania. End of introduction. More about Teddy B and Teddy G, the Roosevelt Bears, by Seymour Eaton. Chapter 1. How the Roosevelt Bears Reached New York. The Roosevelt Bears were born out west, in a big ravine near a mountain crest, where they lived as cubs and had such play as teddy bears have every day. But they learned some things as years went by, of cities great and buildings high, and trains that run at rapid speed, and schools which teach folks how to read, and circus clowns and phonograph, and other things which make folks laugh, and big hotels where meals, they say, are served in style both night and day. They had heard of men of great renown who lived and died in Boston town, of rulers brave and statesmen bold, and millionaires with barrels of gold, of men who worked just day by day for boys and girls in daily pay, and of one they heard who works for fun, the President at Washington. These bears some travel books had found which told them the world is round. They made up their minds that they would see and learn about geography, and visit cities everywhere, and introduce the teddy bear. They found some gold in a cave one day which they could use to pay their way. So one bright morn they said good bye to cave and creek and mountain high, to an old bobcat with a bandaged knee, to a young cougar and squirrels 3, to a bighorn sheep and a mountain deer, and to other friends that lived quite near. And with bags on backs and sticks in hand, they started their tramp across the land. The black bear's name was Teddy B, the B for black or brown, you see, and Teddy G was the gray bear's name, the G for gray. But both bears came for Teddy because everywhere's children called them teddy bears. The Teddy part is a name they found on hat and tree and leggings round, on belt and boot and plates of tin, and scraps of paper and biscuits thin, and other things a hunter dropped at a mountain camp where he had stopped. The story tells how these teddy bears scattered forever all blues and cares, and made fun and frolic and mischief too, and did some tricks for bears quite new. And how some boys, the stories tell, liked these two teddy bears so well that they made $1 million for the stores to sell, some quite little for children small, and some as big as the bears are tall, the brown ones looking like Teddy B and the white as funny as Teddy G. The story goes on to tell how far these two bears rode in a Pullman car, and the tricks they played on folks that night when the colored porter put out the light, and how Teddy G wouldn't sleep upstairs on a shelf, he said, too small for bears. He wanted a window, he wanted to see, and he kept folks awake till 3:30. And the story tells of other tricks in the dining car, and of a mix when Teddy G pulled a rope on top and brought the train to a sudden stop, and how the two were put off the train on a Kansas farm in a shower of rain. The fun they had from that time on fills every page of book number 1. They started by learning the famous trick, how farmer boys get ahead so quick. But the things they did would take your breath, for they scared the farmer half to death. The horses were put at gathering eggs, and pigs walked round on 2 hind legs, and sheep were given the corn to hoe, and potatoes to plant, and wheat to sow. The story tells how an angry bull made a pasture field look pretty full, and chased the 2 bears round a stack, and over the top and down and back. From there to a district school they went, on mischief and education bent, where things were done by Teddy B, who hit the desk and said that he would make letters dance and figures fly, and good boys laugh and bad boys cry. The questions he gave, and the boys their look, they had never seen them in a book. If a camel can go without water a week, how long can he go if he owns a creek? And this, to bound the moon and sky, and name the capital of by and by, and 100 more as hard and tough, till the children said they'd had enough. But when they left the school that day, the children were happy, the farmers say. The story tells how in railway style they ran an engine for a mile, and spent a day at a county show, and helped the boys to make things go. How they walked on ropes drawn good and tight, and jumped through hoops and landed right. And of the ride in an old balloon, which took them halfway to the moon, and things that happened in the sky that night, and the way the world went out of sight, and how they landed in Lincoln Park, in Chicago town, just 'fore dark, and the big hotel on a busy street, where waiters brought them things to eat. How they rang for bellboys just for fun, to give them a quarter and see them run. And the fun they made in vaudeville, children are laughing about it still. And the bargain sale, Teddy G got lost, and the things they bought and what they cost, and their trip to Niagara Falls that night, and what they thought of Niagara's height. And the picnic boys and the boating stunt, when they shot the rapids in a punt, and how the boys made cheering go when the train pulled out for Buffalo. The story tells of their further jaunt, and of Teddy G at a restaurant, how he missed his train and lost his mate, for Teddy B had risen late, and the jolly crowds the Bears to greet, to cheer them all along the street, as they rode from station to common green, in Boston town like king or queen. And of the home on Beacon Hill, where Priscilla Alden and her brother Will entertained them gladly days and nights, while they were seeing the Boston sights. But the things they did in Boston town are done in picture and written down in volume 1 by Teddy's pa, the jolliest book you ever saw. It tells how they captured Bunker Hill, and worked like soldiers with stubborn will, and how they got lost in Boston squares, where crisscross streets run everywheres, and the time they had at Plymouth Rock, when trying to make forefathers talk, and the auto ride to Lexington, which nearly cost them all their fun, for Teddy G would chauffeur be, and he ran that car like 63. It didn't run, he made it sail, and landed himself and his mate in jail. The story tells of their Harvard tricks, where they got themselves in another mix, in getting degrees, a double LD, which didn't fit well on Teddy G. It tells about the talking machine, the funniest thing they had ever seen, how they danced a two-step and sang as well, and heard Uncle Josh his stories tell. It tells of the time when they went to see where the Boston Patriots made good tea in 1763. And then of their sail in a little skiff, and how a storm hit them a biff and sent them out on the ocean wide, halfway across to the other side, and how at noon there came in sight a tower of ice all glistening white, and how they met away out there on this iceberg white a polar bear, and the stories he told of a northern pole which was never seen by a living soul, but it carried a flag both night and day, the stars and stripes of the USA. And the story tells of the rescue made, and how the steamer crowds hurrahed as Yankee Doodle the brass band played. And then it tells, this jolly book, how reporters met them at Sandy Hook, and asked them questions and pictures took, and of New York and its buildings high, and how the Bears made money fly, and dressed in style to see the town, to do Fifth Avenue up and down. And the guide they hired, wee Muddy Pete, a lad whose home was on the street, and his little dog, a terrier white, Pete's boon companion day and night. The story tells of the circus show where the two bears helped to make things go. How like heroes of 100 fights the Roosevelt Bears in colored tights stepped in the ring to dance or sing, to ride or tumble or anything. So these teddy bears are here to stay. They came from the West one summer's day, and journeyed east from town to town, and gathered fame and much renown. Book number 1, boys know it well. The pictures show and the stories tell of how they crossed the USA and made folks laugh both night and day. To New York City there to be told that teddy bears in the shops were sold. But the bears in the shops are only toys made to please good girls and boys. These Roosevelt Bears, Teddies B and G, are as full of mischief as you or me. They laugh and talk and sleep and eat and go around on 2 hind feet and ride on cars and wear good clothes, and the things they do, dear only knows. For they read from books and music play and lose themselves nearly every day. But the story here and these pictures new tell things about them just as true as the things that happen children say from west to east along the way. End of chapter 1. The Roosevelt Bears put out a fire. One day the Bears took trolley rides with Muddy Pete and Cribs for guides. The car was open, they enjoyed the air, they helped the conductor collect the fare, and pulled the bell to start or stop, and fixed the trolley pole on top, and put on the brakes and rang the gong when teams in front didn't move along. But they got in trouble when Teddy G climbed on the roof of the car to see the working of the electricity. What it was that hit him he didn't know, but it hit so smart Teddy G let go and tumbled off a dozen feet from the trolley top down to the street. The car was stopped. Teddy B got out to see what the trouble was all about. The conductor gave expert advice. Muddy Pete replied with words not nice, while Cribs stood round as if to say, "Let us try it again some other day." "The thing that struck me," said Teddy G, as he walked to the curb on hand and knee, "struck me all over, outside and in, at every place, like a prodding pin, and burned like fire, and did all so quick I hadn't time to learn the trick." "Let the car go on," said Teddy B, "we'll stay right here this town to see, and get some lunch and look around, and walk up that hill to that college ground, and climb that pole on the public square, and show the children playing there that the Roosevelt Bears have been to school and know ABC by rote and rule." "You may go yourself," said Teddy G, "and see the town, but as for me, I climbed one pole today before, and it left my bones a trifle sore. I'll stay right here and rest a bit the several places where I got hit." While thus they talked, Muddy Pete and Cribs went off to buy some roasted ribs, and fried potatoes and muffins hot, and 3 cups of coffee in a pot. As they ate their lunch they heard a ring, both quick and loud, ding, 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 ding. "A fire! Fire!" cried Muddy Pete, and off the 4 ran down the street. Teddy G forgot about electricity and ran as fast as Teddy B. They found the fire in a dry goods store and making its way towards 3 or 4 of the largest shops on the busiest street, a clothing house and a store with meat, and a great big grocery on the right, and not a fireman yet in sight. The fireman's hall was across the street, and in half a minute Captain Muddy Pete had told some boys that the job was theirs and had given orders to the Roosevelt Bears about the wagons and reel and hose and hooks and ladders and firemen's clothes. "I've seen 1,000 fires," said he, "and I know this thing from A to Z. Slap on those togs, they fit you slick. Boost out the reel, get busy quick." Hitch up that rubber to that spouter there, twist round the stopper and let her tear. Hang on to that nozzle, you TEDDY G, and point it straight at the fire you see. Now let her go, and with swishing stroke the water struck the fire and smoke. In 60 seconds the Roosevelt team were pouring water, a steady stream, on the blazing store and the crowd nearby, making women run and children cry. Captain Muddy Pete took full command and told the Bears just where to stand and what to do and where to go and to point the nozzle high or low. They climbed up ladders in clouds of smoke and lifted hose and windows broke and carried goods out to the street and burned their ears and scorched their feet. They saved 2 boys from the highest floor who were in a room and had locked the door. The wind was blowing both hard and high and it carried fire to roofs near by. TEDDY G was ordered by Muddy Pete to carry a ladder across the street and go up to a roof with hose in hand and on the ridge to take his stand and turn the hose all round about till every fire he could see was out. And thus they worked like trained firemen till there wasn't a spark where the fires had been. The man that owned the dry goods store took the Bears to his home for an hour or more, and Cribs and Pete for cream and cake, and offered them cash, which they wouldn't take. He ordered a carriage with coachman swell to take them back to their hotel, and promised to print in the local press their pictures large in firemen's dress. And a full report of the fire that day and the things he heard the townsfolk say about bravery shown in the speed they made Captain Muddy Pete and his fire brigade. Said TEDDY B in their room that night, "1 fire a day is enough to fight. I'm stiff and tired and burned and sore. I'm going to sleep a week or more and read in bed and play I'm sick till I get tired of doing that trick." Said TEDDY G as he put out the light, "You fought 1 fire, I had 2 to fight, but I'd rather play with a house afire than fool again with an electric wire." But long before they went to sleep they outlined plans next day to keep. The Hippodrome and the Wax Musee were things they surely had to see. End of chapter 2. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears see the Wax Musee. At 8 o'clock the following day the postman left, the bellboys say, 100 letters for each Roosevelt Bear, from East and West and everywhere. Letters from friends at their mountain glen, telling of trouble with hunting men. A letter from the teacher of the Kansas school, with sums worked out and giving a rule for answering the questions which TEDDY B had given the class in geography. A letter from the farmer where they spent a day, asking them sure to return that way. It said that the bull which scared them blue would be tied by the nose when they came through. A lawyer wrote demanding cash for the old balloon that went to smash. A Niagara lad sent local news and an envelope filled with Niagara views. A sophomore wrote to TEDDY G to ask how he liked his LD degree. Priscilla Alden sent a little note which said she was glad their little boat carried them through the storms so nice and landed them safe on the berg of ice. Letters in dozens from girls and boys, sending them books and candy and toys to give away when they wanted to treat deserving lads like Muddy Pete. The last letter, opened by TEDDY B, was an invitation to the Wax Musee to visit the show that day at 3. "I'll hire a machine," said TEDDY G, "and answer my mail by electricity. There's one at work on the floor below where you feed in letters and let it go. I've seen the writing of this machine like a printed page in blue and green, and the girl who owns it said that she would give a typewriting lesson free." Said TEDDY B, "I'm afraid you're wrong, but if you want to try I'll go along." So down they went to try their luck at printing letters like a book. The girl was out, the machine was there. TEDDY G sat down on the little chair and started in with all his might to pound the keys and make them write, while TEDDY B at every call fed in a letter, envelope and all. "This machine writes Greek," said Teddy B, as he picked up the letters the type to see. "At least the language is new to me. Chicago is spelled without a C, and Boston has neither S nor T. And Priscilla Alden would make you sick, she's like a problem in arithmetic. And that Kansas teacher is doing some tricks with question marks and the figure 6. And that farmer man no one will blame if he shoots us both when he sees his name. You wrote this lawyer about the old balloon in dollar signs enough to buy the moon." But TEDDY G went straight ahead, while the machine by TEDDY B was fed, until every letter that both bears had was answered some way, good or bad. 'Twas 3 o'clock when they left to see the mysteries of the Wax Musee. They found Buster Brown in the entrance hall, and a cat climbing up the building wall, with Tige below looking up at Puss, and Buster's mother trying to stop the fuss. "Good afternoon," said TEDDY B. "Is this Buster Brown and Tige I see?" Tige gave Buster a knowing wink, which put him wise and made him think. "The Roosevelt Bears! I've heard of you. TEDDY B and G, how do you do? You're the jolliest bears I ever saw." And Buster shook each by the paw, while Tige seemed glad that he was near, and put on a smile from ear to ear. "You come with us," said Buster Brown. "We know this place upstairs and down. There are people here in smiles and tears who haven't changed for 100 years. We'll make those laugh who look so sad, and the merry ones we'll make them mad." But Buster's mother made him stay right where he was in wax and clay, and Tige looked round for a place to hide as the Roosevelt Bears passed on inside. They saw the eagle which stole the child and carried it up in the mountains wild. They stopped for a moment to see the king, and to ask Madame Patty if she would sing. They saw Emperor William in a soldier suit, but to all their questions he was deaf and mute. So TEDDY G, to make him look gay, turned the tails of his mustache the other way. At the Roman Forum TEDDY B spoke out, and asked Mark Antony what was all about this Roman crowd and Caesar slain, and why they were doing the thing again. And thus they went from place to place, looking at people of every race, and crimes committed and prisoners hung, and no complaint from any tongue. At the lion's den TEDDY G was wild. A lion had killed a little child. "I'll go right in and smash his face." But a man who was there to guard the place spoke up and said, "That lion in there is not afraid of a Roosevelt Bear. He's made of wax, and that savage look he wears all the time like a picture book." But TEDDY G replied that he, if he owned the place, would let folks see that lions who did such things as they shouldn't live at all in wax or clay. Then on they went upstairs to guess how Ahab played his game of chess. Said TEDDY G, "See if you can play checkers with this wooden man, and while you play I'll take off the lid and find out where the man is hid." 3 games were played, and TEDDY B won every one so fast that he made the wooden eyes flow free with tears the first time in 100 years. TEDDY G looked at him from head to heels, and his side door opened to see the wheels, and the man's mainspring and his wooden heart he examined with care and took apart. But he couldn't find out high or low how this man of wood made the checkers go. TEDDY B was polite and said "Good bye," and the man got up and wiped his eye, and held out his hand as well's he could (it had several pieces all made of wood), and said, "Your playing was pretty good." As the Bears passed out of the Wax Musee, a paper was handed to TEDDY G, which read like this in printing bold: Resolved, that mothers should never scold, for boys are wax and scoldings stick, and impressions can't be rubbed out quick. Resolved, that the world was made for play, and that boys and bears should have their way, when fun is needed the blues to down. Signed by Tige and Buster Brown. The 4 took hands to skip and sing, and dance around in a jolly ring. Folks crowded near, inside and out, to see what the fun was all about. 1,000 shoppers on the street paused as they passed the Bears to meet. A speech was asked from TEDDY B as he stepped to the door the crowd to see. The U.S. boys and girls are ours, they're made of sunshine, love, and flowers. We're bound with them to scatter blues, and we're here today to spread the news. When TEDDY B these things had said, he Buster's resolution read, while Tige and Buster inside the door became wax again as they were before. End of chapter 3. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears visit West Point. The day was fine and the Bears were free to take a river boat to see the Palisades and Tarrytown and to view the Hudson up and down. A request had come from a young cadet of West Point School whom the Bears had met, to dine at the West Point Army Mess and to see the boys in their army dress, and to sleep on an army barracks cot, and to try their luck at a target shot, and to ride barebacked in the hurdle chute, or to join a band with drum and flute, or to hear good stories of army fights after taps are sounded to put out the lights. So they sent a wire to the cadet to say that they would call that very day. They made the trip with but one mishap. The wind blew off a newsboy's cap as he walked around on the steamer deck calling out the news of a railway wreck, and selling his papers and chewing gum to the crowd of tourists going some. TEDDY G made a jump as he saw it go, and he and the cap went down below. Like a diver he struck the water right, and quick as a wink was out of sight. "Man's overboard!" was called aloud, and a cheer went up from the tourist crowd as they saw in the water in a little while the face of a bear with a pleasant smile. The boat was stopped and a rope thrown out, and in answer to the captain's shout, TEDDY G called back, "The water's fine, I've got the bait, pull in your line." It didn't take them long to get TEDDY G on board, all dripping wet. The children laughed, he looked so queer, with the newsboy's cap hung on his ear. He bowed to tourists left and right, and said something about his appetite. He asked the steward to bring on some meals as the steamer band played Silver Heels. At West Point Landing the Bears were met by a double carriage with the young cadet, and a cavalry mount to escort them round to see the buildings on the ground. They drove about for an hour or less, then went to their barrack rooms to dress in soldier suits for the evening mess. TEDDY B said he'd be colonel's aide and inspect the boys on dress parade, while TEDDY G said he'd march or stand as leader of the soldier band. The parade dismissed and the supper through, the Bears had nothing else to do but to roll themselves in barrack wraps and to put out the lights at the sound of taps. At reveille at 6 next day they were wide awake and bright and gay, and dressed and ready for hours of fun with cavalry horse or battery gun. The boys had fun when TEDDY B rode a cavalry horse down a chute to see how to jump the walls and the hurdles take without a tumble or balk or break. The horse was tricky but the bear was game, and he made him clear each thing that came. Whether wall or water or brush or bar, TEDDY B would have tried a railway car, or a barn or a tree or a load of hay, or any old thing that came in his way. The finest riding the officers say that was done at West Point for many a day. TEDDY G took his turn at soldier fun when he loaded and fired a battery gun. He charged in powder and cannonball, "So simple," he said, "it's nothing at all." He asked a cadet his hat to keep till he stepped to the muzzle to take a peep, to see if the ball was in all right, and if things in front were out of sight. What happened next no one can tell. TEDDY G was lifted in air a spell, and whirled around so quick in space he didn't remember just what took place. "I caught that ball all right," said he, when the officer questioned TEDDY G. "But I don't like catching balls like that. My place I think is at the bat. Next time you pitch don't throw so quick. You struck me like a load of brick." Said the officer, "For bravery shown We'll give you a title all your own. You can drop your Harvard L&D and be known as Colonel Teddy G." The boys got out the fife and drum and made things all around them hum as they marched ahead of the Roosevelt Bears in army step down the flight of stairs to take the ferry at 4:30 across the river to the other shore, where a train was waiting to take them down the eastern bank and back to town. "Let us go tomorrow," said Teddy G, "and a first-class game of baseball see. That ball they pitched at West Point School had hardly time enough to cool. It struck my paws so fiery hot, I thought for a minute that I was shot." End of chapter 4. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears play baseball. The Bears were invited by Muddy Pete to go with him to an East Side street, to visit children who never see either grass or field or flower or tree. They loaded up like old Saint Nick with bundles piled on high and thick, bouquets of flowers for children sick, and toys and candy for those at play, and 100 other things, folks say, who saw them on the street that day. They went around from door to door where bears had never been before, climbed flights of stairs and bumped their heads to cheer up lads who were sick in beds, threw bouquets into windows high and picked nice toys and let them fly, and candy boxes and twigs of green wherever boys and girls were seen. But the jolliest sport of the day began when they met an organ grinder man with a monkey trained to act the clown and pick up pennies boys throw down. Teddy G asked the man if he could go with his monkey band for an hour or so. Teddy B said he the troupe would join and see that rich folks shelled out coin. He'd give the monkey double pay, 5 cents an hour for half a day, and the organ man may go, said they, and join some other kind of play. Or if you're tired, the two bears said, go home for the day and go to bed. We'll use your organ and monkey clown and pay you half $1 down, and $2 more when we are through, and return your band as good as new. With help from Cribs and Muddy Pete, we'll find our way from street to street. This bargain made, the bears set out to give the children roundabout, and old folks too along the street, the funniest kind of music treat. Teddy G took the crank, and just for fun made marches dance and two-steps run, and polkas gallop and waltzes race, and street songs step at a lively pace, while Teddy B climbed up on top of the music box, stood on its prop, and threw the monkey and made him yell, and caught him every time he fell. A boy got a drum for Muddy Pete, and Cribs danced round on 2 hind feet, and all 5 laughed and cheered and sang, and made things go with slap and bang. The crowd of children filled the square, 500 boys and girls were there, and scores of men stopped work to see the tricks of Teddy's B and G. Nickels enough and quarters too, and silver dollars, not a few, were collected that day by the players 4 to give a fresh air week down by the shore to boys and girls a score or more who had never seen the sea before. The afternoon was good and hot, and the bears sat down in a vacant lot to count their cash and rest their feet and eat some lunch with Muddy Pete. They returned to the organ grinder man his music box and collection can, and his monkey clown and some monkey too, just as he bargained they should do. They gave the monkey an extra dime for working 2 hours overtime, and a box of nuts as a special treat, the kind that monkeys like to eat. 7 boys came over to where they sat, with bags of sand and ball and bat, and baseball gloves and masks of wire, and asked if they the bears could hire. "We're going to play," a lad spoke up, "the Bowery 9 for a silver cup, and we're short 2 men, good players they, but they couldn't come to the game today." "And the Bowery 9," another said, "are bigger boys by half a head, and good at bat and quick to run, they beat us last time 2 to 1." "They don't play fair," said another lad, "they count all balls both good and bad. They claimed a foul when I made a base, and when I objected they slapped my face." "The Bowery 9," said TEDDY-B, "is the kind of 9 I'd like to see. We'll join the team and run the game And win that silver cup just the same." "Give me some pointers," said TEDDY—G, "This game you play is new to me." The Bears were coached in every rule, And they both caught on like boys at school. The Bowery boys, in a little while, Came on the lot in baseball style. They read off rules to the other 9 And helped lay out the diamond line. "In size," they said among themselves, "These Roosevelt Bears are number 12s." But the Bowery captain bet his hat That neither Bear could pitch or bat. "This game," he said, "is as good as won. We'll beat those fellows 10-1." A Bowery boy went to the bat While the other 8 on some lumber sat To watch the play and wait their turn And see the Bears their fingers burn. TEDDY—B, as catcher in mask and pad, Met every ball both good and bad With snap and skill so sure and quick He seemed to know the baseball trick. While TEDDY—G at the pitcher's box Put balls to bat like hammer knocks. And with curves so neat and twists so new The fielders hadn't a thing to do, For not a boy could make a hit And one by one the plate they quit. Said Muddy Pete, "Their cake is dough," As he marked the score a great big O. "It's our turn now," said TEDDY—B, "We'll let those Bowery fellows see That the team that wins this game today Will make their score by honest play. And of all the batting that was ever done In games that lost or in games that won, In timing hits and in making base And in running home in the wildest race, This play that day of the Roosevelt Bears Beat baseball records everywhere. They knocked that ball so hard and high Above the clouds up in the sky That while it tarried out of sight The Bears went round with all their might And scored so fast for that silver cup That Muddy Pete could scarce keep up. 9 innings each they didn't get, For the Roosevelt Bears would be batting yet If the Bowery boys hadn't stopped the score At 0 for them to 64. End of Chapter 5. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears arrive in Philadelphia. The Bears went out to a country place To see a machine take its trial race, Invented by a New Jersey man And made to fly on a novel plan. This trial trip was to prove that day That machines that fly have come to stay. When the hour arrived to cut the cord There wasn't a man who would go aboard. The Bears said they would make the trip And every racing record whip If they only knew how to steer the ship. "We've sailed before," said TEDDY—B, "We hit Chicago down a tree From an old balloon that brought us there From a Missouri town at a country fair." "I'm not afraid," said TEDDY—G, "I'd like to go to the moon to see If the man up there charges entrance fees And what he does with all the cheese." But as they talked the machine got wise And with buzz and whiz it began to rise And broke the ropes that held it tight And went towards the clouds and out of sight, With TEDDY—B and TEDDY—G crabbing at anything they could see. The one on a bar beneath the sail And the other on a rope to make a tail. They started so quick and went so high They hadn't a chance to say good bye. They had ridden before, and lively too, On cowboy horses and in frail canoe, In an old balloon and a mobile car, But this ride that day beat those by far. They went over town and farm and creek In one straight line like a lightning streak, And it wasn't 40 minutes when They came in sight of William Penn, Looking so wise and straight and tall On the top of Philadelphia's City Hall. TEDDY—B called out from where he sat, "There's a man ahead, I see his hat. His hand is out, he means to try To catch the rope as we go by." And TEDDY—G in cowboy style Let out the rope nearly half a mile, And as it coiled he pulled with might And William Penn he lassoed tight. A crowd of children down below Looked up and saw the Bears let go And come from the clouds like sailors bold With not a thing but the rope to hold. and land all right on the old man's hat, where both sat down to have a chat, and look about and view the town, and ask each other how they'd get down. They looked over the brim to see Penn's face, and asked him questions about the place. What would happen if they should fall, and how long it took to build the hall, and what it cost, and if he thought it nice to pay so much for expert advice. And one thing sure they'd like to know, why this Quaker town was considered slow. A crowd soon gathered round the square, police and engineers were there, and business men and children too, and each one wondering what to do, for how to get the two bears down was soon being asked by half the town. The mayor came out with a megaphone, and called aloud up the tower of stone, and promised Father Penn a dime if he'd give the bears a high old time. Not very far from where they sat, a door was opened in the Quaker hat, and a man put out his head to say that the Roosevelt Bears could come that way. But the door was small, and it wouldn't do, for neither bear could be crowded through. Said Teddy B, "Go to the street, and bring a rope 600 feet, and William here will hold one end, while we to the square below descend." This plan was tried, and in half an hour the bears had landed from the tower, and had shaken hands right then and there with every child around the square. From there they went, the papers say, to a Broad Street bank to draw their pay, or to cash a check which Teddy G had got in New York as their circus fee. When they asked for money, the man inside said, "You'll have to be identified. Perhaps your names are what you say, but prove it you must some other way." "Is that check good?" said Teddy B. "Well, if it is, I'll let you see that G is he and B is me." But before he had time to act the bear, the check was taken and the cash was there. To a shop they went on Chestnut Street, and dressed up new from head to feet, and got the bill and paid the fee, and started out the town to see. Two little lads named Jack and Will had bought 4 tickets for vaudeville, 4 seats up front at a children's show that was given to help poor boys to go to a training school where men are paid to teach young lads a useful trade. The boys had heard of the Roosevelt Bears, and they spent their money for the extra chairs that very day on Chestnut Street to give the bears this special treat. The boys had followed the bears a square, intending to ask if they would care to use up their time that day to go with 2 little lads to the children's show. Jack was bravest and walked close behind to see if the bears were really kind. "You speak to Teddy B," said he, "and I'll put the question to Teddy G." "All right," said Will, and he stepped ahead, and this to Teddy B he said, "Mr. Teddy B, will you come with me right now a children's show to see? I have your ticket, it's paid for too. I bought it specially for you." "That was good of you. Of course I'll go," said Teddy B, "to the children's show. We're here to make the jolliest kind of fun for every child we find." "Me too," said Jack, 'twas all he said. His courage wasn't in his head. But Teddy G, to answer Jack, lifted him high up on his back, and danced a jig right then and there, to show the crowd that a Roosevelt Bear for serious people didn't care. They lived for fun, and their fun they'd share, free of expense and everywhere. But the things that happened to Jack and Will that afternoon at vaudeville were not on the program of the children's show. For the Roosevelt Bears, folks say who know, made the biggest hit of their lives that day, and put up an afternoon of play, the like of which was never seen by old or young, by king or queen. End of chapter 6. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears entertained Philadelphia children. The theater chairs were filled with fun, for a boy or girl was in every one, except the 4 which Jack and Will and the Roosevelt Bears had come to fill. The band was playing the latest air, and laughing children everywhere, as the Bears walked down the central aisle, in their summer suits cut Philadelphia style. They looked so jolly and smiled so sweet that the children clapped and stamped their feet, and waved their hands and stood on chairs and cried hurrah for the Roosevelt Bears. But the Bears were large and the seats were small, and they found they couldn't sit down at all. So they stood in the aisle to view the crowd, and thus spoke TEDDY B out loud: "Young ladies and gentlemen, children dear, and chairmen too, if there is one here, TEDDY G and I have come to stay to hear you laugh and to see the play. And since we can't very well sit down, we'll go on the stage and help the clown, and stand and sit on wall or floor, and do some tricks we have done before, and some quite old and some quite new, and keep it up till the show is through." The children called for TEDDY G, but he shook his head and said that he could sing a song or dance a jig, or sit on chairs either small or big, or talk to girls or with them dine, but to make a speech wasn't quite his line. The speeches through, a theater page took the two Bears back upon the stage. As the curtain rolled up to the top, a man at the back asked the Bears to stop. "Two clowns are on the stage," said he. "They have started their piece, and I'll let you see that you can't interrupt or make a noise, or you'll spoil the show for these girls and boys." "Your advice is right," said TEDDY B, and out they went, the clowns to see. The clowns were scared when they saw the Bears step up behind them unawares, and they ran for doors at left and right, and as quick as a wink were out of sight. But they were ordered back to earn their fee, and to take a turn with TEDDY B's and G. And from that hour the play went smart, for the two Bears helped in every part. They made those two clowns march and sing, jump over chairs and through a ring, and climb up poles and ride a wheel, and do a clog dance, toe and heel. And when they finished, amid loud applause, the Bears ran off on all four paws, with the clowns on backs with jolly noise, throwing kisses back to girls and boys. The orchestra played "A Boy Called Taps," and then appeared a troupe of Japs, a dozen little men in tights, the heroes of 100 fights. For a little while the Bears stood by and watched the Japs their muscles try, and saw them balance balls and bricks on parasols and billiard sticks, and climb up ladders out of sight, and fall again and land all right. Then TEDDY B said he'd like to do a Western schoolboy trick he knew. He made the Japs stand in a row, and take hold of hands and not let go. Then he caught one end, and with whirling clip he showed them how to crack the whip. The Japs went whizzing in the air, and whirled in circles everywhere, but they did the trick so smart and neat that every Jap lit on his feet. A man with hoops was next to play, and he asked if TEDDY G would stay and help him show the boys and girls how wooden hoops were taught their twirls. But this trick with hoops put TEDDY G in so many circles he couldn't see. They came flying at him through the air, and rolling in from everywhere, and try his best he couldn't throw a single hoop and make it go. He was hooped around from head to paw, the funniest sight you ever saw, but he enjoyed the fun and said that he wore rings enough that day for 3. But the jolliest thing that day was when the two Bears dressed as Irishmen, a Dublin Mike and a Pat from Cork, came on the stage to look for work. TEDDY G is Mike with workman's hod, and TEDDY B is Pat from Blarney Sod. With blackthorn sticks their foes to hit, and filled to the brim with Irish wit, their Irish brogue in joke and song made the children laugh both loud and long. The last part of the show that day was sleight of hand, the programs say, but why it failed to work out well the man who tried it couldn't tell. A trunk was brought, a solid mass, with iron locks and bound in brass. The Bears were asked to get inside. The trunk was locked and with rope tied, and the man announced that at his command he'd slide a curtain and there would stand the Roosevelt Bears outside and free, with the trunk unlocked by any key. But it didn't work, the Bears weren't there, and it gave the man a little scare to find he couldn't do the trick, and the trunk was unlocked pretty quick, for fear they'd smother for want of air. But the Bears had gone, no one knows where. The trunk was empty, not as they feared. The Roosevelt Bears had disappeared. The Bears had gone, but no one knew just where to look or what to do. Detectives hunted high and low, and questioned folks who ought to know, and listened for the slightest sound, and hunted rooms beneath the ground, and through the halls walked round and round, but not a trace of the Bears they found. At supper time at home that night, the boys and girls told of their flight, and the jokes they cracked and tricks they played, and the jolliest kind of fun they made, and how they saw them locked and tied so tight and fast that children cried. Some little girls and wee boys too wouldn't go to bed until they knew how TEDDY B and TEDDY G got out of the trunk without a key. But their papas told them not to mind, that some one the Bears that night would find, and the papers sure the following day would explain in full how they got away. End of chapter 7. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears spend a day at Atlantic City. How the Bears got out of the box that day was never known, the children say, but that afternoon, about 4:30, they engaged fine rooms on the 7th floor, about halfway up and halfway down of the best hotel there was in town, and there they stayed, enjoying a rest, and eating things the very best, and seeing reporters and playing pool, and learning things not taught in school. Said TEDDY B one morning bright, after spending a hot and sleepless night, "The weather's warm and sticky too, for fellows dressed like me and you. I move we take a little run down to the shore for some ocean fun. I've heard it said that the bathing there, with sandy bottoms everywhere, is quite a fad with men of wealth who go there simply for their health." "My health is good," said TEDDY G, "and I've wealth enough for you and me, but if bathing's fun, that's what I need. My health consists of fun and feed." So off they went that very day to try Atlantic City Spray. They took a ferry to Camden Town, and got a train which shot them down across New Jersey and to the sea, so quick they scarce had time to fee. The porter boy who brushed their clothes and told them that hotels in rows lined every street and the ocean front so thick they wouldn't have to hunt, and bathing houses, a score or more, he said they'd find them near the shore. They walked the boardwalk to and fro, and took a peep at every show. They heard bands play and auctioneers make speeches which reduced to tears the crowds of buyers who bargains sought but didn't need the goods they bought. They took a turn with a wheeling chair of double size to fit a bear, with TEDDY B the lazy kind, and TEDDY G the man behind. A palmist read their paws to see how long they'd live and what would be their fortunes in the years to come, when as millionaires they'd be going some. They saw the fish haul on the pier, and the loaded net with fishes queer. They rode the donkeys on the sand, and held some children by the hand, while rides they took on donkey back, and made the bathers clear the track. They went below with shivery feel, in a little boat where the water wheel went splashing round with all its might, and pushed their boat into darkest night. And then to a boardwalk place they went, two colored bathing suits to rent. They dressed themselves like thousands more who were walking up and down the shore, and across the sand in running dash they struck the breakers with a splash. Of all the fun of every sort since Columbus sailed from Genoa's port, that the old Atlantic ever had with ocean bathers good or bad, with buccaneers or pirate crafts, or shipwrecked crews on lonesome rafts, with fishermen in ocean wave, or boats sent out their lives to save, or tourists bound for foreign clime, with dinners upset all the time, with ocean fish of every form which swim the same in calm or storm, with Admiral Drake or Captain Kidd who stole some gold and got it hid, or with careless boys of whom you've read who sometimes fall in overhead. This fun the Atlantic had that day, some 50,000 bathers say, beat every record for 1,000 years, and made waves laugh themselves to tears. For the Roosevelt Bears had nerve and pluck, and as they faced each wave to duck, they plunged right in and got upset, head over paws and awful wet. They took boys out in water deep and made them from their shoulders leap, and rescued swimmers, 4 or 5, and brought them back to shore alive. And when they tired of the ocean's whirls, they played on the sand with boys and girls, and ran and danced and had lots of fun, and dried themselves in the midday sun. When back they went to get their suits, to put on trousers, coats, and boots, said TEDDY G from his little house, "This bathing suit wouldn't fit a mouse. It's shrunk all up like a lady's glove, and won't come off by pull or shove." Said TEDDY B from the box next door, "Why didn't you put on 3 or 4?" But TEDDY G didn't see the joke, and said he'd rip the thing or choke. And rip he did from end to end, in a way no stitch would ever mend. "It came off that way both smooth and nice," said TEDDY G when he asked the price. They went that night by lucky chance to an ocean pier, where a cakewalk dance Was on in style with couples 6 who knew full well the cakewalk tricks. 2 pickaninnies won the prize. They beat all records for their size, and as they did their last encore, the Roosevelt Bears went on the floor, and all 4 danced with toe and paw, the smartest cakewalk you ever saw. The dancing finished with laugh and cheer, then all the children on the pier shook hands with TEDDY's B and G, and asked them both to come to see a children's dance, a pretty sight, which they would give the following night. But the Bears replied with much regret that Philadelphia they had not seen yet. They must go back and crackers buy to celebrate 4th of July, for they were bound to show the world that when Stars and Stripes were first unfurled, and Liberty rang sweet and loud for warriors brave and patriots proud, this flag and bell right then and there meant freedom for both man and bear. End of chapter 8. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears celebrate the 4th. TEDDY G went out the night before to Market Street to a fireworks store, and bought a load of crackers red, and torpedoes round like balls of lead, and great big whirlies which you light and then run off with all your might, and flags and kites and pistol toys, the kind to give to little boys, and rockets which go whizzing high to shoot bright stars around the sky, and sticks to hold and turn about while balls of fire come popping out, and drums to beat and horns to blow, and things to shoot and things to throw, and small balloons in colors gay, and 100 flags to give away, in all about $12 worth to celebrate July the 4th. They didn't sleep a wink that night, but started out before 'twas light to historic Independence Square, for that, said TEDDY B, is where this western world beyond the sea unfurled the flag of liberty, and that's the place, and this the date, where loyalty must celebrate. "Oh, you come off," said TEDDY G, "it's fun that I am here to see. Who cares today who won the game? We'll shoot off crackers just the same." And this is how the 2 bears talked as down the street to the square they walked. TEDDY B of heroes brave and bold, and things they did in days of old, while TEDDY G just had his say about things to do that very day. At the Liberty Bell they took a try, and hoisted it up good and high, and rang it out both loud and clear, and at every ring there went up a cheer, for the only day in all the year when the crack doesn't spoil the tone set forth is Independence Day, July the 4th. At least that's what the children say, and they know this bell from Z to A. But the fun began with the Roosevelt Bears when boys stole on them unawares, and put a match to TEDDY G in his coat tail pocket, where, you see, he had stored some crackers, a good sized bunch, along with hard boiled eggs for lunch. Lickety split, pat, pit, bang, boo, and the coat tail smoked and split in 2, and hard boiled eggs shot here and there, and the bear went up and down in air. But he told the lads he didn't care, that fun might start in anywhere. At front or back, in hat or boot, put punk to powder and let it shoot. We are out, he said, for fun and noise, and when fun is trump, boys will be boys. And from that hour the lads and he shared all there was to do or see. They strung a wire from tree to tree, and then the fellows with TEDDY B put crackers all along the wire to prepare the field for an army fire. Said TEDDY G as he explained the play, "We'll fasten a flag on the wire halfway, and you boys under yonder tree who have taken sides with TEDDY B, when I say the word you put your fire at the cracker next to you on the wire, while I, if my boys a hand will lend, will put a match to the other end. To reach the flag first, that's the game, and the side which wins this piece of fame wins all the crackers big or small which haven't gone off when time I call. If on both sides the armies flunk, both captains use again their punk." When both the sides the rules did know, TEDDY G called out, "1, 2, 3, go!" And at the words two armies shot their cracker guns both quick and hot, as on they marched along the wire in powder smoke and blazing fire. The flag was won by TEDDY G, and prisoners taken 93 of the finest crackers the others had, all not shot off, both good and bad. But this army game was children's play compared with things they did that day. From noon till night they let things go in sky above and on earth below, with slap and bang and smoke and noise like any two July 4th boys. They sent balloons up to the clouds and a dozen kites to please the crowds, and then shot rockets just to try to hit the things up in the sky. They dug a hole down in the ground and filled it full of crackers round, and shot them off to hear the sound. They burned their paws and scorched their hair, and when darkness came they did their share of firing rockets everywhere, and in burning lights a fiery red till long past time for going to bed. When the day was o'er, said TEDDY B, "Let's go to-morrow to the Zoo to see the animals imprisoned there, the elephant and polar bear, the lions, tigers, and kangaroos, and tell them one and all the news. That July the 4th is the day that we, who own and love this country, do celebrate in smoke and noise, that we may teach our girls and boys that this one day of every year is given them free to shout and cheer, as a safety valve for them and you, to keep things running square and true." Said TEDDY G, "I'll freedom teach and try to practice what I preach. To-morrow I'll let out the zoo, the elephants and monkeys too, and the polar bear and kangaroo. They're just as good as me or you." End of chapter 9. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears visit the zoo. Said TEDDY G, the thing to do, as they reached the high fence round the zoo, in the early morning about 2:30, is to get in there with this load of cake before the keepers are awake. "You climb the fence," said TEDDY B, "and throw this rope back here to me, and pull up the baskets one by one, and we'll land in there a good-sized ton of the finest cake that was ever made, and strawberry tarts and lemonade, and cherry pie and sugar sticks, and red ice cream in good-sized bricks, and peanut candy and chocolate eclairs, and other things quite new to bears. Don't waste your time in telling me I bought these things," said TEDDY G, and up he climbed with business sense a tree which grew beside the fence, and out a limb and dropped below, and called out, "All right, I'm in, let go," and up went baskets 2 by 2 over the fence into the zoo. And before the day began to break, the bears had camped with their load of cake on a grassy knoll where they couldn't hide, and with dens and pens on every side. "We're in here now," said TEDDY B, "what do you say we do?" said he. "Let's feed the animals," said TEDDY G. "I move we let out 2 or 3 and bring them here and feed them cake, and see just how our show will take. And if they are pleased, why we'll go round and let loose everything on the ground." To the elephant house the 2 bears went, and stirred up the biggest elephant, and marched him over to their cake before he had time to get half awake. "You mind these things," said TEDDY—G, "our breakfast hour is 3:30. If you are good you can have a snack to keep you chewing till we come back." And they gave old Bolivar—that was his name— some things to eat till back they came. Then off they went to the monkey cage, where monkeys of every size and age were using hands and feet and lungs and saying good morning in 1,000 tongues. TEDDY—B made them promise they'd be good, at least that's what he understood, if he'd open the cage and let them out and give them an hour to run about. "We have," said he, "some pie and cake, which TEDDY—G will undertake to serve out free in an hour or two to every animal in the zoo. We'll give you as much as you deserve if you'll act as waiters and help us serve." The monkeys grinned from ear to ear and winked at each other a little queer, and nodded their heads and seemed to say that the 2 Bears' orders they'd obey. The cage was opened and the crowd went out, little and big, with laugh and shout, upsetting each other across the green, the funniest bunch that was ever seen. The Bears went then to the beaver pond and told the beavers if they were fond of good ice cream served by baboons to bring on their tails to use for spoons. They saw some foxes, red and gray, and asked them to dine with them that day. The wolves looked hungry and said they'd see that all left over was given them free. The rhinoceros couldn't accept their treat, he had some rheumatics in his feet, but in a cage near by a kangaroo jumped 20 feet when they let him through. An ostrich standing 6 feet high called out to the Bears as they went by to hurry around with a piece of pie. 2 mountain goats with curling horn said the mountain crest where they were born their father rented just for thanks to the Roosevelt Bears to play their pranks. And this they thought was cause indeed why they should be asked to the morning feed. A hedgehog and a porcupine were the next pair asked by the Bears to dine. Then a dromedary chewing his cud said he wouldn't budge from where he stood, but if they'd bring him a piece of cake he'd see if he liked their kind of bake. From there they went to the animals' cage, where they found the tigers in a rage, and the lions roaring to beat the band in language the Bears didn't understand. A chimpanzee came near to see, and he made a face at TEDDY—G. He was eating pie and said he feared that their basket lunch had disappeared. The Bears took warning and started back to find 10 keepers on their track, and animals both big and small running wild on every maw, and Bolivar with his trumpet loud calling for help to stop the crowd. The monkeys had gone in a solid bunch and captured the whole of the picnic lunch, and out on limbs and high up on poles and on top of roofs and into holes, and every monkey with cake or jam or pie or tart or sandwich ham, or nuts or lemonade or cheese, and Bolivar shaking poles and trees, and hungry wolves and the kangaroo, and mountain goats and a deer or two, running wild from place to place, helping on the monkey chase. 'Twas noon that day when keepers 10 and a police brigade of 50 men and 100 boys and firemen 6 got the monkey troop to stop their tricks. The Bears looked on throughout the show and helped on the fun by laughing so, for TEDDY—G, since he was a cub, or at Bunker Hill down in the hub, said that making fun seemed to be his forte, and that he had never had such lively sport. But the keeper made him change his laugh when he locked them up with a big giraffe, and told them to stay and pay a fine when the police court met next day at 9. End of Chapter 10. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears go fishing. When the Roosevelt Bears had paid their fine for the mischief done and the monkey shine, they said good-bye to the big giraffe and told him his neck was too long by half, and asked the time it took his food to reach his body from where he chewed, and why he held his head so high, and the size of collars he had to buy, and why he was neither round nor square. But the old giraffe didn't seem to care. He wagged his tail and winked his eye and nodded his head to say good-bye. When they quit the zoo and got outside, "Let us take a train for a little ride. I'm tired of town and want to see a farm or stream," said TEDDY B. So a train they took without the fare, for where it went they didn't care. When "Tickets, please," the conductor said, TEDDY G began to scratch his head, and to think up names of towns he knew, like Hoboken and Kalamazoo. But when "Tickets, please," he said again, TEDDY G got busy with a 10, and said, "Take this for your railway pay, and stop the train some time to day, Where fishing's good if you go that way." The conductor asked them questions strange About their plans as he gave them change, And slips of paper with holes punched through. He said a fishing stream he knew. He'd stop the train at any rate, And show them where to buy some bait, And fishing poles, and hook and line, And a jolly inn to sleep and dine. They reached the place that day at 2, And said good bye to the railroad crew, And went by a path up a mountain ridge As the train went on across a bridge. They found the place and got fitted out With 6 poles apiece, both long and stout, And bait enough and lines and hooks To fish a year in a dozen brooks. For said TEDDY G, "If fishing's play, Then I want enough, for I mean to stay Right by the game for at least a week, Until every fish that's in the creek Is caught and cleaned and cooked and ate, Or cut up in pieces to use for bait." So down their rods and lines they took To the stream below to try their luck. Of all the fishing that was ever done By Isaac Walton or his eldest son, Or by boys who fish with pins for hooks That we read about in the picture books, Or for salmon trout which weigh a ton That they say are caught in Oregon, Or for shad in the river Delaware, Or for pike or black bass anywhere, The fish that day caught by the Bears Would take first prizes at all the fairs. And the way they caught them left and right, And the way they coaxed the fish to bite, And the way they tossed the fish in air, Landing in trees and everywhere, And the way they made the chipmunks run, The fish themselves enjoyed the fun. For one fish spoke, vows TEDDY G, A great big pounder, 2 or 3, And said he wouldn't miss the game Even if he never lived again. A sport, he said, like TEDDY G Is the kind that fishes love to see. TEDDY G got his line caught in a tree And climbed up on high to get it free, When a 'possum called down from above, "If you come up here you'll get a shove Which will toss you off and break your head And put you 15 weeks in bed." But TEDDY G just shook with glee And said, "I'll come right up to see." The 'possum scared and trembled so He fell off the limb and down below, Where TEDDY B broke an ugly fall By catching him like a rubber ball. They fed that 'possum fishes 8, And gave him hook and line and bait, And told him stories about the zoo And the things they let the monkeys do. They met a man by the stream that day Who has fished for 100 years, they say, In ocean, river, creek and pond, And mountain brook and lake beyond, With statesmen bold and actors gay, And farmer lads found by the way. He told them stories of fish he'd caught, And when fish were few, of fish he'd bought, And then had talked of this big land And of men he knew on every hand, The true to love and those to hate, Who fish for gain with stolen bait. He told them how to have most fun When they struck the town of Washington, Because, he said, though I'm on the shelf, I had some fun there once myself. TEDDY B said he would like to know How near a Roosevelt Bear could go To the Capitol or Monument Without being shot by the President. But the man replied, "Trout fishing's fine, But shooting bears isn't in my line. Take my advice and take your gun When you turn your steps toward Washington." They shook his hand both long and tight And said they'd leave that very night. They could get a train, they said, at 4 For Washington and Baltimore. They tramped along a country pike And wished for horses, train or bike, Till they met a lad on his way from school Whom they stopped to question about a rule To multiply and square and add, And what teachers did with lessons bad, And who made spelling and what 'twas for, And the day and hour of the next big war, And what athletics were all about, And where figures go when you rub them out, And why the moon isn't always round, And the difference between a noise and sound. And on a fence how long 'twould take To rest an hour or a dinner bake, And how things inside the earth were done, But the lad couldn't answer a single one. Said TEDDY G, "If it doesn't rain, And you'll tell us where to get a train, And the fare to pay, and how long the run From the place you name to Washington, And your age and weight and greatest height, And 2 bears you know that never bite, I'll give you $1 quick as a wink, And let you have it before you think." Though he had never learned this dollar trick, The lad was bright and he answered quick, And they said good bye and it didn't rain Till they stepped on board their Pullman train. Said TEDDY G as he lit his pipe, And bought some apples red and ripe, And settled down in an easy seat With a resting place for both his feet. "I'm tired of clothes, I'm tired of fun, When I see the town of Washington. I'm off again for the woolly West, I like the mountains much the best. I want to live as free as air, I'm satisfied to be a bear." "But you forget," said TEDDY B, "That all these things we came East to see Were made by the brains of every clime To keep folks working all the time." "That's all right," said TEDDY G, "They can work ahead, but as for me, I don't believe that bears were made To be busy always at a trade." End of chapter 11. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears in Pittsburg. They were on the train and at their ease When the conductor called out, "Tickets, please." "We have no tickets," said TEDDY G, "But cash we have, as you will see. And to Washington we want to go To see the President and to let him know That we are fully satisfied That Uncle Sam is tall and wide And big around, of mighty girth, The greatest show on all the earth. His boys and girls are full of fun From Omaha to Washington." But the conductor said, "You ought to know, If to Washington you want to go, You've started wrong. This train you're on Is a Pittsburg special from Washington. And tomorrow morning, if we're not late, You'll be in Pittsburg at 8:30." The Bears looked dazed and then looked mad, And then they laughed and both looked glad. Said TEDDY B, "Pay up the fares, We'll pass tomorrow as millionaires," And found a library and put through a deal Of high finance in oil or steel. But TEDDY G didn't think so far, He thought of night and the sleeping car. He recalled some cranky things he said When they made him sleep in an upper bed On a train out West, and the banjo song And the things they did a little wrong, Till both were put right off the train On a Kansas farm in a shower of rain. The conductor heard this wise remark, "If on this train when the night is dark You want this bear to behave himself, Don't make him sleep on a Pullman shelf." But the trip was made without mishap, And both the bears enjoyed a nap In lower berths till 8 o'clock, When the porter gave their berths a knock And said, "Get up, it's broad daylight, The Iron City is now in sight." But things outside looked black as night, And said TEDDY B, "Do you mean to say That this is Pittsburg and this is day?" The man replied, "Get up, that's smoke. Take my advice, and when you joke About this town don't do it loud, For Pittsburg people live in a cloud, And their ideas about a bear May be colored some by Pittsburg air." "What's that you say?" called TEDDY G. "You seem to know your geography. But let me say right here and now I'll teach your Pittsburg people how To dance and sing, to laugh and joke In mountain air or city smoke, For they must know this very day That Pittsburg too was made for play." They took a cab to a big hotel Where things are done both smart and swell, And breakfast over, TEDDY B, On mischief bent, went out to see What the telegraph and phone could do To get a crowd their tricks to view. He called up schools, every one in town, And ordered all the children down To the old block house at noon to see The Teddy Bears teach history. Then on the mayor he played a lark By ordering the police to Schenley Park To be locked up there till after dark, "For," said TEDDY B, "the police, you know, Might spoil our little block house show." At costume shops each Teddy Bear Bought a lot of Indian things to wear. They planned at the old block house to meet at the corner of a nearby street, and from that spot like Indians race and take possession of the place. They did the trick in Wild West style, their whoops and yells were heard a mile. But the fight was short, no one to scare, there wasn't a soul there anywhere. They made the place from roof to floor like 1764, and put things into shape to fool the boys and girls from every school. The children came 5,000 strong, a happy, merry, lively throng. The little ones by teachers led to study history, they said. But the history lesson learned that day was livelier stuff, the fellows say, than most boys learn at public school, for it didn't follow any rule, but just shot off with laughter loud in every corner of the crowd. The Teddy Bears, as Indians brave, did everything but behave. They chased each other round the block with bow and arrow and tomahawk. They climbed to the roof and danced a jig and called to children small and big to catch the arrows every time and bring them back and get a dime. And then to finish up the sport they asked the boys to take the fort, the boys to be the soldiers bold, and they as Indians the place to hold. In this the boys came out ahead, the Bears pretended they were dead, while the boys to do the thing up well sent 2 dead bears to the hotel. In half an hour they lived again and were out on bicycles for a spin. This time to see men making steel, and in Highland Park to have a wheel, and to see the Zoo and the Bridge of Sighs, and Luna Park where they won the prize. In the afternoon they put up a lark at the entrance gate of Highland Park. A little lad who flew a kite had got the string caught good and tight. On the entrance post where Teddy G climbed up the post and said that he would untie the knot and start the kite up to the sky and out of sight. A rope was lying twirled around where workmen left it on the ground, and Teddy G as quick as wink, and before the men had time to think, caught up the rope and made it tight from post to post, from left to right, and out he went like a circus clown and whirled around head up and down, and walked the rope and made more play than folks had seen for many a day. At 6 o'clock they said good-bye to busy streets and smoky sky, and to boys and girls for the day of fun, and started back towards Washington. Said Teddy B as a town they passed where furnaces made fiery blast, "I'd rather be a Teddy Bear than stand that heat and work in there. But this old world was made, they say, so that men would work and bears could play." End of chapter 12. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears get out a newspaper. When the station clock was striking 4, the Bears got off at Baltimore. They met a newsboy on the street who said the newsboys were to meet that night at 6 in a nook of theirs, and they'd like to have the Teddy Bears drop in and help them plan and think how best to earn some extra chink. Said Teddy B, "I'd like to walk around to your club and hear you talk, and make a speech and help along with dance or story, trick or song." "You ought to know," the lad replied, "that some months ago a newsboy died. That night his papers didn't sell, and he had no home, no one to tell how cold he was and hungry too, and he just died, was frozen through. We mean to give a newsboy show to buy a home where the boys can go." This story stirred up Teddy G. "You leave that show to me," said he. "I'll use my wit from nose to paw to make more cash than you ever saw." "I have a plan," said Teddy B. "Let us run a paper just to see if our sheet won't sell like 63. We'll fill each page with jolly stuff and give the boys the greatest puff. We'll raise the price and earn the pay to build that home in half a day." So off they went to try their hand at a job they didn't understand, to edit, proofread, print and sell a newspaper and do it well. The publisher took them all about to show how a paper is gotten out. They questioned every man they met, and with the manager made a bet that they could put each page in rhyme and get the paper out on time. The bet was taken, the job was theirs, a paper run by Teddy Bears, and they had to have their own sweet way with news and ads for a single day. They said they'd do the best they could and make a sheet that was bright and good. Of all the orders boys ever hear who work on papers all the year, the orders given to the boys that night beat every record out of sight. They made the editors fume and frown, and reporters chase all around the town. And telegraph instruments click and chime, and telephone bells ring all the time, and linotypes go double speed and set up type big enough to read, and advertisers fight for space, and presses go at double pace, and everything hum on every floor to beat all scoops ever made before. But the paper was out on time next day, the greatest paper, newsboys say, that was ever printed in all the land by the fastest press or done by hand. They had floods and fires and earthquakes too, and kings beheaded and discoveries new, and ships upset and railroad wrecks, and 10 millionaires break their necks, and the sun eclipsed at 12 at night, and Japan start up another fight, and Russia move clean off the earth, and an elephant sleep in an upper berth, and Niagara Falls turn upside down, and the president wear a golden crown, and 10 feet of snow right in July, and a man discovered 19 feet high, and robberies 8 and murders 10, and mosquitoes kill 10,000 men, and a Wall Street smash, the worst in years, that made the bulls and bears shed tears, and Robinson Crusoe come back to life and land in Baltimore with a wife, and little Bo Peep who lost her sheep sold at auction mighty cheap, and the money hid by Captain Kidd found in a box without a lid by a colored boy in the Isle of Wight, $100,000 bright. A diamond mine they said was found on Charles Street above the ground. They had boys at school their lessons know in headlines deep a foot or so, and all the girls in the world combine to go to bed at 9:30, or if rules they broke to pay a fine, and ending up on the final page, a prophecy of a future age. When teddy bears would rulers be, and hunt for men in cave or tree, with guide and gun, with horse and hound, in a Colorado hunting ground. The advertisements made that night were what the printers call a fright, all shoved together old and new, upside down and wrong side too. Grocers had hats and caps for sale, and tailors eggs and barbers ale, and department stores had railroad ads, and big hotels sold writing pads, and music stores sold soap and tea, and theaters said admission free, and a jeweler, the best in town, offered cheap a wedding gown. A private school sold cheese and lard, and furniture was offered by the yard. When TEDDY B saw what was done, he said he thought 'twould make good fun, for we mean, said he, to sell our sheet, and every record sale to beat. The paper sold at first for 10, but when approved by business men, the price went up on every hand, and with papers in such brisk demand, you couldn't get a single sheet by 10 o'clock upon the street. The money made for the boys that day bought them a home with grounds to play, and enough to spare to give each lad the jolliest time he ever had. A fresh air week down by the sea, with candy cake and soda free. The Bears were glad when their work was done to start for the town of Washington, to see the president and shake his hand, and then go home as they had planned. End of chapter 13. This recording is in the public domain. The Roosevelt Bears visit Washington, D.C., and complete their tour of the East. When the Bears arrived in Washington, they set out at once to buy a gun. They bought 3 guns and pistols 10, and suits and belts like fighting men. When dress complete, then off they went to the house where lives the President. When they reached the grounds and the entrance gate, no one was near to make them wait. The news had spread round everywheres of this visit planned by the Roosevelt Bears. A policeman dodged behind a tree when he got first sight of TEDDY B. Detectives wise with eagle eye didn't stop to ask the reason why, but ducked their heads behind a wall and got under cover one and all. A doorkeeper in gold and black said, "Wait a minute till I come back." And lawyers bold and statesmen brave, who make the president behave, moved out of sight as quick as wink to offer help. They didn't think, but they were hunters just the same, though hunting bears wasn't quite their game. The boys who answer the call of bells lost all the breath they use for yells. In crossing lawns in serious fright, they ran for home with all their might. And secretaries 3 or 4 got under desks down on the floor when they saw the bears at the entrance door. But one little lad who was playing round, when he saw the bears he stood his ground and stepped up bravely to TEDDY-G and said, "Who is it you want to see?" Said TEDDY-G in his kindliest way, "We have traveled east and have come today to see the hunter who doesn't scare and who isn't afraid of man or bear." The bears by the lad were keenly eyed, and he said as he beckoned them both inside, "My dad's in here, but wipe your feet. I think you're the kind he likes to meet." They stepped inside, and the man they saw looked them over from head to paw, and with outstretched hand and smiling face he gave them welcome to the place. Said TEDDY-G when he caught his breath, "I thought this call meant certain death. We armed ourselves with loaded gun when we struck this town of Washington, for here 'twas said we'd surely see the man who chased bears up a tree, and with both eyes shut on darkest night could hit a bear and win a fight." "To stand your ground," said TEDDY-B, "is the thing that we bears like to see. If fighting's trump or simply fun, we stand, eyes front, and never run. But those men of yours who guard your fort should be taken west for a little sport, and taught the things you learned out there when climbing mountains, chasing bear." But he simply laughed at what they said and joked of stories he had read in newspapers of things they'd done on their journey east to Washington. They talked away for an hour or two of hunting trips and friends they knew, and this country wide and its cities great, from Boston Hub to the Golden Gate. The bears were asked to come next day at an early hour to have a play on the White House grounds and in children's tent, and to breakfast with the President. This visit o'er, they started out to see the buildings all about, the Capitol with its rounded dome where the U.S. Senate makes its home, and congressmen from every state gather in halls to deliberate, the Treasury with its vaults of gold as much as a dozen trains could hold, and silver too, and crisp bank notes enough to load 100 boats, the library with its pictured halls and books stored high within its walls, the gardens with their trees and flowers, and a museum where they stayed for hours, and last of all, built straight and high, a shaft that stands against the sky, set off with stones which good friends sent in memory of a president. TEDDY-G said he would like to see that famous little cherry tree, and get some cherries red and sweet to take back home to give a treat to the big raccoon and the mountain goat and the old cougar and the young coyote, to make them square and help them try to tell the truth and not to lie. So off they went that day at 3, out in the country the farm to see, where George's father used to stop and where the boy learned how to chop. They found the place as the guidebook said, and the cherry stump, but no cherries red. The stump was there and the hatchet too, and neither looking very new. Said TEDDY-B when these things he saw, and took the hatchet in his paw, "Of all the shrines of history which you and I came east to see, this spot right here I say is trump, this hatchet and this cherry stump." TEDDY-G said he would like to try little George's axe on a tree near by, to prove to the world that he could do a trick like that and own up too. And chop he did an apple tree, and left a note where all could see this tree was chopped by TEDDY-G. They breakfasted the following day with the President and had their play for an hour before from early dawn with boys and girls upon his lawn. They asked the President if he would come out west their home to see. Said TEDDY-B, "We'll treat you white and put you up both day and night with grizzly bears and panthers wild, and give you sport not quite so mild as driving Congress with its load, or riding horseback down the road." This strenuous life, said TEDDY-G, is too hard work by half for me. I'll start back home this very day, and for a month at home I'll stay, and rest my eyes, and sleep, and eat, and get down again on all 4 feet." Said TEDDY B, "Our journey's through. There's nothing left to see or do. We were treated well everywhere we went, and we have seen the President. And now for home, that's what I say, but I mean to journey back this way, to take a boat for London town, to see the King in his golden crown." The reporters called that afternoon, when they heard the Bears were going so soon, and begged a column at least of news about their trip and plans and views. TEDDY B wrote out in boldest hand these lines that all can understand: "To the boys we say, be always gay, and with jolly play fill every day. Be brave, be true, be square and white, and don't forget to your friends to write. And to the girls, we've no advice, you're every one both sweet and nice. And to all the people whom we've met, please say we leave with much regret for our mountain cave and brook and tree." Signed, TEDDY B and TEDDY G. As their train pulled out, an army band played airs well known o'er all the land, and boys and girls waved their good-byes, and tears filled many children's eyes. TEDDY B called back to the crowd that he would come East again each one to see, and TEDDY G said he'd do his best to treat them well if they came out West. End of chapter 14. This recording is in the public domain. The Teddy Bears arrive home. As they crossed the country from east to west, they stayed in their sleeping car to rest, and but once or twice looked out to see the towns passed through and country. Said TEDDY G, "I'd like again to see that farm where we have been, and that country school and those boys at play, for that was our very jolliest day. What I wish most," said TEDDY B, "is when we get off this train that we shall have those horses to carry our load back over the hills on the mountain road." The horses were there with saddle and rein, and met the Bears at the railway train, and 6 mountain goats like baggage men were there to help them to the glen. As back they traveled that mountain road, the goats heaped high with the baggage load, and the Teddy Bears on bronco backs piled front and back with loaded sacks. They looked like bandits with their spoil, or highwaymen after a day of toil, or perhaps more like true knights of old returning home with captured gold. As they approached the place where they were born, TEDDY G blew loud on a trumpet horn. A West Point bugle call he knew, and 1,000 friends came into view, the Teddy Bears to greet with cheers by this animal camp of mountaineers. For the news had scattered far and wide when the Bears would reach the mountain side, and the crowd had come from far and near to welcome back 2 friends so dear. The old bobcat with the bandaged knee was the first to shake with TEDDY B, and a young cougar and a panther bold helped TEDDY G his load to hold, and 2 bighorn sheep and a mountain deer stood up on stumps to lead each cheer, and hundreds more gave welcome hand to the most famous Bears in all the land. They had gifts for each bought in the East, and they passed them round at the evening feast, and then told stories for nights and days about their trip and the city ways, and the fun they had and the tricks they played, and the things they saw and where they stayed, and last and best the time they spent in Washington with the President. As the Bears turned in to their own home nest and curled up snug for the winter's rest, said TEDDY G as he fell asleep, "If I should pray for things to keep of what I've seen either East or West, it's boys and girls I like the best." End of chapter 15. This recording is in the public domain. End of More About TEDDY B and TEDDY G, the Roosevelt Bears, by Seymour Eaton.